The garage had been there since 1968, before the highway came through and took the feed store with it, before the diner closed and the school consolidated. Earl Decker's shop stayed, stubborn as the man himself. The town moved on. Earl did not. Every wrench hung in exactly its place. He'd learned that from his father, a man of few words and precise habits. The pegboard was the only wall in his life he'd ever kept perfectly ordered. Everything else had come loose at the edges a long time ago. There were always 3 or 4 waiting. Some people drove from 2 counties over. Earl never advertised, never needed to. In a small town, reputation is the only currency that doesn't depreciate. His had been compounding since 1974. He arrived at 5:45 every morning, not because he had to, because an empty house at 5:45 had a different kind of silence than the garage did. He chose the silence he could fill with work. Those hands had rebuilt 312 engines. He'd counted once, kept a ledger, 1 line per vehicle, date, make, model, what was broken, what he charged. He never wrote down what it cost him. The photograph had been on that bench since 1987. He'd stopped looking at it directly around 1994, but he never moved it. Her name was Ruth. She hadn't left, not in the way people assumed. She'd just stopped being able to reach him. She said, "I loved this garage more than I loved her." She wasn't entirely wrong. Before the grief, before the war, before the marriage that bent and finally broke under the weight of everything he wouldn't say. There had been a boy who just loved engines, 16 years old, knuckles bleeding, grinning anyway. The town shrank slowly, the way things do when nobody's watching. First the hardware store, then the bank, then the young people, one graduation at a time. Earl watched it all from the same 40-foot bay. Some things, he figured, were just built to last longer than everything around them. In the far corner of the shop, beneath a canvas tarp gone stiff with age, sat the car, a 1969 Dodge Charger RT. Earl had bought it in 1987. He was going to restore it for his son. His son never came back from overseas. The tarp stayed on. 23 years, it stayed on. One evening, a woman came in. She had found something in her grandfather's things. A letter, addressed to Earl, never opened. She set it on the workbench without a word. Earl looked at it a long time, then quietly, "Some things are heavier when they're still sealed." He didn't open it that night. He went back to work instead. By midnight, the town was silent. But the light in Earl's shop never went out. The neighbors had stopped noticing years ago. The night dispatcher at the grain elevator still used it to tell the time. If the light was on, it wasn't yet tomorrow. Earl didn't sleep much. Sleeping felt like surrender. 3 mechanics in town had closed up since Earl opened his doors. 2 moved to the city. 1 retired to Arizona. Earl watched each of them go. He swept his floor, checked his oil, sharpened a chisel he hadn't used in 6 years. He stayed. Not because leaving hadn't crossed his mind, it had, but because some things only stand if someone is willing to stand with them. On a Tuesday in March, Earl Decker walked into his shop before sunrise and did not turn on the radio. He stood in front of the charger for 11 minutes. No one knows what he decided, only what he did. He picked up a socket wrench, and he got to work. The tarp had been there so long, it had taken the shape of the car beneath it. Dust had settled into its folds like years pressed into cloth. When Earl pulled it free, the charger sat exactly as he had left it. Primer gray, hood unlatched, the passenger door still slightly misaligned, as if it had simply been waiting. Not rusting, not giving up, just waiting. He worked 6 hours that first day, then 7 the next. His hands remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The torque sequence on the heads, the clearance on the cam, the way the engine breathed when it was almost right, but not quite. He had not felt time move that fast in 23 years. By April, people started noticing the light on past midnight in Earl's shop. Ronnie Watts mentioned it at the diner, said he drove past 3 nights in a row, and the building was lit up like something important was happening inside. Nobody knew what to call it, but they drove slower past that shop, and some of them, without quite knowing why, started to feel like something in this town was coming back. The last part arrived on a Tuesday. Earl didn't open the box right away. He set it on the workbench and made coffee instead. He had waited 23 years. A few more hours wouldn't hurt. When the sun went down, he opened it. A fuel pump, small enough to fit in his palm. The last thing standing between Earl Decker and finished. He worked until 2 in the morning. Not because he had to, because he finally could. On a Thursday morning in November, Earl Decker turned the key. The garage was cold. The light was grey. Nobody was watching. The charger coughed. Then it caught. The sound that came out of that engine had been waiting 23 years to be heard. Earl sat perfectly still behind the wheel. Outside, a dog barked twice, then went quiet, as if even the town understood. Something had changed. They asked Earl later what it felt like. He thought about it for a long time. Then he said, like putting something down that you forgot you were still carrying. He never talked about the years in between, the cold mornings, the parts he couldn't afford, the nights he almost sold it. He just said it was worth it. And in Earl Decker's economy, that was everything. The Charger sits in the driveway now. Most days. Earl doesn't drive it far, just around the county roads on Sunday mornings, when the traffic is thin and the air is cold and nobody needs anything from him yet. He is 71 years old. He has outlasted 3 recessions, 1 divorce, and more bad winters than he can count. He fixed things nobody asked him to fix. He stayed when staying was the harder thing. And on a quiet Thursday morning in November, with no one watching, he started an engine that the world had forgotten was still worth starting. Some men leave a mark. Earl Decker left something harder to find. He left proof.